special guests, our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Marcelo Cavasos, welcome.
Thank you.
And Cindy Powell, our Chief Financial Officer with the Arlington ISD. So welcome. We're going to get into some questions here in just a minute, but I wanted to let you guys know, if you're watching on our Facebook Live, you can leave any questions about the 2019 bond down in the comment section. Becky's here, Mercedes is here. They're going to be taking those questions and feeding them over to me so we can get those answered by Dr. Cavasos, by Ms. Powell here on our Facebook Live. But if you're watching afterwards on the rebroadcast, go ahead and leave your questions in the comment section and we'll have one of our subject matter experts get those answered for you. So let's just start from the very beginning. This is 2019. It's $966 million bond proposal. What all does that include in a summary statement, essentially, Dr. Cavasos?
Yeah, so thank you for the opportunity here to visit about the bond. And so what this includes at a summary level are condition work across the district. Buildings will be improved across the district with very important condition work such as restrooms and kitchens and HVAC and things like that. Also replacement of schools. So we have a number of aging facilities and this bond includes replacing those schools. Implementation of full-day pre-kinder. The state provided funding for full-day pre-kinder but not for the facilities. So this allows us to set a standard for full-day pre-K classrooms, including furniture and bathrooms and things like that are really important. Fine arts, the fundamentals of fine arts with instruments and uniforms and things like that. Also athletics allows us to improve our athletic facilities and opportunities for our students. New playground equipment and shaded structures for every elementary school that are accessible, shaded, and the equipment is accessible across every elementary school, which is really important for our schools. Safety, security, and technology continues to be a priority for us, and so this bond also includes funding for upgrades of communications, of systems, of network systems, of device replacements and things like that, and transportation, purchasing buses and vehicles to transport students and equipment from different locations. So this bond is comprehensive in the sense that it touches every part of the district and it also serves all our students.
And Ms. Powell, you've mentioned throughout the proposition here and the development of it that Arlington can accomplish a $966 million bond without an increase to the tax rate. Talk about that and how that's possible.
Sure, so thank you. It's largely because of the way we've managed our existing debt. So we have bonded debt today that is outstanding. That debt is decreasing very rapidly, and we've taken every opportunity possible to advance refund some of those outstanding bonds to help us lower our outstanding debt. So our debt is decreasing, and our property values are very strong. The economy is strong, and so we are able to issue new bonds and not have to change our tax rate to fund these bonds.
So, Dr. Cavasos, you mentioned some of those large areas that are going to be focus areas in the 2019 bond. One of them being, you mentioned, new facilities.
That's right.
So this seems to be new for Arlington, where we're looking out across our landscape and seeing that we have buildings that have aged out of their life cycle. So what is the plan in the 2019 bond around replacing some of our existing schools?
Yeah, so it's what you mentioned, that some of our facilities are aged. They're not yielding the return on investment. We keep investing in fixing the buildings, but they're not yielding the return. They're safe facilities. There's teaching and learning going on today. They're just not yielding that return. And so we've identified a number of those facilities in Arlington that are 60 plus years in terms of average age. So this would include replacing Carter Junior High, Berry Elementary, Thornton Elementary, and Webb Elementary. This also includes closing Roark and Knox Elementary. And so if you think about it, it's taking 6 older facilities offline and replacing them with 4 modern learning facilities for our students and staff. Also allows us to be more operationally efficient as we progress in the replacement of buildings. So as parts of our district have aged, it's also important to note that the buildings there have been there for a long time and modern learning spaces are important for our students and their success. So in this bond, just with that one portion of it, we're able to take 6 facilities that are aged offline, replace them with 4, and better meet the needs of students.
So would those be larger schools to accommodate more students, or how does that work if we're taking 2 schools offline and replacing them with 4?
Yeah, so in essence, it is a combination. It's a comprehensive plan. So much of our bond is interdependent, and it's comprehensive to meet a variety of needs. And so there's a lot of detail in that one portion. But it allows us to rezone and reboundary certain schools around that area, make sure that the students are served. Yes, in the larger facilities, we know that McNutt and Patrick and schools like that are more recent are larger schools. They have collaborative spaces, they have larger libraries, cafeterias, and things like that, a gymnasium integrated into the building and things of that nature. We know that that serves students in a better way, allows for the flow and things like that. So yes, they'll be larger. There'll also be some rebounding as a result of this that includes these schools so that students are served in the most appropriate places. Carter Junior High, for example, will be a modern Carter Junior High. It will be larger. It'll also have spaces where students can own their work and be more autonomous, and the things that happen in new learning environments that we know are important.
And we're here in one of those new learning environments that was made possible through the 2014 bond. Ms. Powell, there was a school, a junior high school where we are now, coming to you live today from the Dan Dipert Career and Technical Center. A few years ago, this facility wasn't here. So you've been through some of the transition that's necessary to take a school offline and to bring a new modern learning facility into play. What are some things that parents and our community need to be mindful of?
So first of all, we make sure that we have sufficient capacity to serve all of our students. We also make sure that we are offering the kinds of programs that our students and parents are seeking. So in 2013, as we did our assessment to prepare for the 2014 bond program, we determined several things. We had a lot of input from the community that showed us that we had strong demand for career tech program offerings from students and parents. We also knew that on this site we had a very, very old junior high school that had a lot of condition needs itself. Our assessment also showed us that we had excess capacity at our junior high level. We had 12 junior high schools at the time, and our data showed us we needed 10. And so all these things began to intersect as we did our planning work. We ultimately determined that a very optimal solution would be that we could take Hutchinson completely offline. We could consolidate the Hutchinson students at Workman. We made sure we made the appropriate additions and expansions at Workman to accommodate the additional students. Then we tore down the very old Hutchinson that sat on this site and repurposed the site for the Career Tech Center. So this one move allowed us to address multiple needs for our district. We improved program offerings for kids. We right-sized our needs at the junior high level, and we eliminated a very, very old building that really was not a proper learning space for our students anymore. The other thing it allowed us to do was relieve some of the utilization pressure at our high school levels, where we had some very, very full high schools. Kids now come to the Career Tech Center throughout the day to take their specialized career tech classes, and so they're not on their home campus while they're here. So that relieves a little bit of that utilization pressure at the home high school. So all these things together yielded a very positive outcome that now has generated opportunities for kids to participate in 38 additional certificate programs here at the Career Tech Center and earn industry certificates that were never available before with the resources we had. So, for example, today I think our certificate count this past year was over 1,000 versus just about 200 before we had the Career Tech Center. We'll use similar thinking and have used similar thinking in our assessment work for the 2019 bond proposition in determining the combination of our facility needs and our long-range enrollment projections, putting all that information together and then yielding or putting forth recommendations that we think will improve learning experiences and opportunities for our kids, especially with this what we're calling our East Arlington Master Plan that's part of the bond package.
Okay, we're going to continue on with the facilities discussion, but I just want to remind you guys, if you're watching live and you have questions about the 2019 bond, just drop those questions in the comment section. It looks like we have some now. Let's see, the bond includes projects. So one of our followers wants to talk about some of the improvements that are in the 2019 bond package as it relates to the facility we're in today. Dr. Cavasos, what kind of improvements will be at the Career Tech Center?
Yeah, so fundamentally, as Cindy mentioned, this center opened 2.5 years ago approximately, and it is already at capacity. And so for this bond, it includes classroom additions or classrooms that'll be added to the Career Tech Center, mostly in the area of health sciences, but also allows them to be adaptable for future courses. So we know at the Career Tech Center, as we've experienced it, we're able to adapt to the needs of industry, needs of the workforce, and needs of our students. And so this addition will help relieve some of the usage here as well, but also expand programs, specifically in the health sciences and programs such as that.
Okay, and let's see, we've got our 2019 bond includes career tech improvements at the high schools directly. So what is that all about? How does the bond support those in high schools, Ms. Powell?
So our students take their introductory career tech courses at their home high schools. They come here as juniors and seniors for specialized courses. Today, 4 of our high schools don't have all of the right lab space for those introductory courses. Generally, it's either a welding lab, a construction lab, or a culinary lab that they don't have. And so today, students at those schools who are wanting to pursue a course pathway in one of those areas has to leave their campus and come either here to the Career Tech Center or our Ag Science Center to take those introductory courses. So there's an access gap there, if you will, and an equity need to be able to offer those introductory courses across all of our 6 high schools. And so we have funding in this bond proposition to add those lab spaces that are missing, and it's different ones at different high schools, but we have funding in here in this bond proposition to add those fundamental spaces at all of our high schools.
Okay, so improvements here too. And our next question is, how did you choose which 4 schools need to be torn down and replaced? That's a good question.
Yeah, so it's fundamentally based on their age and condition and the investment it would take to bring it up and continue it to be a school that'll yield the results. And so when you rank those schools, these are some of the oldest, some of the condition that needs to be done at those schools, and the most expensive. And so you look at, is it at some point better to replace the entire school than to keep investing over time? And so that's how we came up with the schools on the list, including Roark and Knox as some of those schools as well. Undersized in some cases, such as Roark, also an aged facility. And so what plan that we could put together comprehensively with our community that would address that. So this is a movement in terms of addressing older facilities. In the 2019 bond, it's starting with 6 older facilities, taking them offline. And so that's fundamentally how we came to the decision. I will tell you that as we have discussed this over with stakeholders and community, et cetera, there is some energy around it because the community and people that have lived in the community have been to these schools and have seen these schools for many, many years and understand that the environment and just the core services, the bathrooms, the library, the cafeteria, the classroom size and things like that, just not adequate.
Yeah, I think I've heard you guys say, and I've seen it myself in schools, schools are not the way they used to be, when you would walk in and all the rows would be in perfect alignment and the teacher would be at the front of the classroom. You only needed so much space for that with a chalkboard at the front, but school today is very different, where kids are learning in the way that they learn best. And as you mentioned, those collaborative workspaces, which is how the workforce operates in many cases today. So looking at redesigning the new schools allows those educational spaces to be modern.
That's right.
And you mentioned this, Dr. Cavasos, it's not just a benefit for the students.
Right.
How does that help the teachers?
Well, it allows our teachers to do their best work in the best environment. And so when you have opportunities for students to own their own learning, to work in collaborative teams, to communicate differently and express and demonstrate their learning in a different way, through the facility that they have, including equipment and space, then it really allows the teacher to employ and deploy different strategies for instruction and learning. We know that that's happening across the district, but we also know that in some facilities, they're not designed to really take full advantage of that type of learning. And that's something that in preparation for an environment like this, like at the Dipert Center, for example, where students have more autonomy, students own their own learning, they have different learning spaces and different design for that, a way to collaborate within groups and teams and grade levels. We know that that's the preparation for their future. And so these facilities that we're talking about, they're not designed for that. They were designed in a different time. And so that's the thinking behind what it would actually yield for not only students, but for staff to do their best work.
Okay, I'm going to come back with one more question about Carter Junior High that I actually got on my Facebook page last night that I think we can address, but let's see. Someone would like to know if we could touch on how we utilize community input to develop our plan for the bond. Ms. Powell, that's a great question because you spearheaded all of that effort.
We did, yes, I facilitated that. And so having community input in any sort of a proposition or long-range planning is absolutely vital to the success and make sure that, that we're meeting the needs of the community. And so as we completed our assessment work, we made a presentation, we being administration, to the board about the needs we had identified. The board then determined that they needed to seat a committee, a capital needs steering committee, to study our needs and to give their own input and then to solicit more input from the community to help all of us prioritize this list of identified needs. So the board appointed a capital needs steering committee of 37 individuals, and they represent a broad cross-section of the community. We had parents, students actually on the committee, principals, teachers, business people, retirees. We had representatives from TCC, UTA, and an assistant city manager. And so all these individuals came together beginning in January, and they met multiple times from January through June to review data that we supplied to them. They then also had subcommittees that focused on the different categories of needs that we had identified. Those small groups met at least one time. One of the committees met multiple times. And then the committee as a whole hosted community dialogues, 8 different community meetings where we took input from people on what their priorities were. And we had questionnaires that people filled out at those dialogues, surveys, if you will. We also posted those online so that people who had not attended one of the dialogues could also have an avenue to give their opinions. We, in total, had over 2,000 survey responses, and very, very positive, very, very productive, very constructive in helping us prioritize needs. The committee then processed all of this information and ultimately came to a consensus in June on what they thought were the highest priority items for our needs out through the year 2025, and then they presented those findings to the board in late June.
So, Dr. Cavasos, playing into that, you always talk about the fact that this plan, this 2019 bond proposal, it's not created in a vacuum. It's part of an overall plan. Tell us a little bit about the strategic plan, the community input, and how all of that worked together to make the recommendation.
Yeah, so as comprehensive as the bond proposition is, and the things we're talking about today, it is a piece of a larger puzzle that's really guided by our strategic plan in Arlington. And a strategic plan that was built with the community, with our board, with staff input, and that really has yielded that 100% of our students will be prepared for college, career, and citizenship. That's our fundamental goal through rigorous learning experiences. And so that's a big guide for the work that we do in Arlington, our strategic plan. The bond is a big part of that strategic plan. So what I often say is that these things are not random. These things are really planned out and purposeful to meet a larger goal to make sure our students are successful. But we know it takes many different components. And so that's what drives not only the things we do in the district, but in particular that we're talking about today, drives our bond.
So the strategic plan lends itself to how a committee comes together, Ms. Powell, that you formed and led the district through, where we have thoughts from lots of different stakeholders across the community. So that's how this bond came to be. So I want to go back to the facilities section for just a second, because one of the questions that I saw on my Facebook page last night was about Carter Junior High, and I thought it was a really good question. Why not just rebuild on that site? You already own the property. Can't you just build up or build around?
So Carter property itself is not conducive to a modern Carter and the size of a junior high. We struggle with erosion behind Carter Junior High. If you're familiar with that area, there's Johnson Creek that runs behind it, and we've had to move the field once away from the creek. So there's not enough real estate, if you will, to build a modern Carter Junior High on that location. That's fundamentally the reason why that's not a conducive environment. The other is that by moving Carter to the Knox property, it actually brings the school to the center of the student population that the school serves. Today, Carter, where it's located, is a little on the outskirts of the student population. By bringing it to Knox, then the Knox property, it will become now the center of the student population that it serves. So just like Cindy mentioned earlier, there are some guiding principles with the way we design and develop our bond proposition. Solving persistent issues in Arlington, and we can talk more about that in a minute, but also being interdependent, making sure that there's access for students, that there's equity around the district. So this is just one example of a property that at Knox that is more suitable for a modern Carter. The fact that it brings the school to the center of the student population, in essence, and then it solves another issue with a property that we have now that is being affected by erosion. And so that's fundamentally how we ended up not designing and trying to build Carter in the property that exists now.
And you talked about access and equity, and I want to come back to that in just a second. We want to talk about that in relationship to new full-day pre-K, and you mentioned in our intro, in our summary, that there would be some improvements for access and equity at the elementary school level. So I want to talk about those things here in just a second. But first I want to remind you guys that if you're watching live, you can leave your questions down in the comment section. Mercedes is here, Becky's here. They're monitoring the comments, and they're feeding those questions over to us so that we can get them answered for you. If you're watching on the rebroadcast, just go ahead and leave your questions down there, and we'll have a subject matter expert respond to those just as soon as we can. So the state did recently mandate full-day pre-K, and in Arlington, that was something that was already a part of that strategic plan that you mentioned earlier, Dr. Cavasos. But what needs to happen in this bond? What have you proposed in this bond to make full-day pre-K a possibility in Arlington?
Yeah, and so full-day pre-K was certainly something that we have been aiming towards. We only offer half-day pre-K. But we were planning to develop strategy to someday offer full-day pre-K. The state has funded that now, so it allows that opportunity. The state does not fund the facilities for full-day pre-K. They fund the operation of full-day pre-K. And so in this bond is setting a standard for full-day pre-K classrooms, a standard that then we would implement across the district, including the furniture, the size of the room, bathrooms in the classrooms that are very important for the learning of students in terms of pre-K. So that's what the bond does in terms of full-day pre-K.
One of the questions that we get, Ms. Powell, is around the bond itself and why it's not paying for the salaries of our teachers, those pre-K teachers for full-day pre-K. And I know that you've got a really good explanation for this.
So bond programs are the avenue for school districts to pay for capital needs. And it is like having a mortgage on your home. It's a long-term repayment period, and you pay interest on those bonds. So salaries are recurring annual expenses, and so you would not want to and cannot use bond funds to pay for salaries, because you would be paying salaries and interest on salaries over a number of years if you're using bond dollars to pay for those. So that's why we are not permitted to use bond funds for operating salaries such as teachers. We pay for those out of our general operating fund.
Now, House Bill 3, which is new, we've had a lot of discussions with our stakeholders about House Bill 3 and what it means in particular for full-day pre-K. Ms. Powell, how does full-day pre-K become possible through House Bill 3?
Sure. So as Dr. Cavasos mentioned, up until this year, we have offered half-day pre-K because that's what the state would fund, was half-day pre-K. So most districts across the state had half-day pre-K programs for eligible students. With House Bill 3, the state recognized the benefit that a full-day program can have on student achievement. And so they determined that they would fund full-day pre-K program offering. So in House Bill 3, there is a new allotment called an early education allotment that is intended to pay for that additional half day of pre-K available to us. So with that investment, the state has also mandated that districts offer full-day pre-K beginning with this year. They're giving districts a couple of years to roll into this because of this is a major program change that requires hiring additional teachers and making the facility adjustments that we've already talked about. So all of that was part of House Bill 3.
Yes, it has to work in harmony, right?
Yes.
So the other part that you mentioned that would be part of access and equity are our elementary school playgrounds.
That's
Dr.
correct.
Cavasos, what will we be doing to improve playgrounds?
Yeah, so our playgrounds currently are also aged out, and so we would be constructing and designing and constructing 2 playgrounds at every elementary, one for pre-K 3 and one for 4 through 6. And so those playgrounds will have accessible surfaces, which today they don't have, so all students can access the playgrounds. It'll have shaded structure, which today they don't have. Many of our schools don't have that, to allow for the health and wellness of our students during times when the weather's not ideal and it's hot and things like that outside. Also allow the equipment to have accessible equipment for all students. And so that's a big kind of step forward for our district, ensuring that the accessibility for our youngest students in terms of playground in our facility are there. And they're also shaded and well designed to meet the needs of our students today. So that's across the district. That addresses many different issues and different concerns as you move through those areas in our schools.
There's over 50 elementary
That's
schools,
right.
right, in Arlington. So that's a
Yeah.
significant investment
Absolutely.
in access and equity. Let's take some more questions and then we'll come back and we'll change gears over to fine arts. But one of our Facebook followers asked for the 2019 plan. Do we plan to include more personnel in the transportation area, and how will the bond help with transportation? So let's just do transportation and we'll come to fine arts later. So we'll start in on transportation.
Sure. So in the bond proposition is funding for replacement of 55 older buses that have reached the end of their life. So those are straight up replacements. We also have funding for some additional buses to help us meet program needs and enrollment needs, and also something very new for us, to help us provide transportation for what the state describes as hazardous routes. A hazardous route is an area within 2 miles of a school that is really not safe for students to walk along a sidewalk or a major thoroughfare. So today, the state pays school districts to transport kids who live more than 2 miles from their campus. and they don't pay for transportation within 2 miles, except if you have a hazardous route. We know, because we are a big city, that we have some places where it's really not safe for kids to walk along a major thoroughfare or to cross a major thoroughfare, such as a Cooper Street or an I-30 or an I-20, and especially for our youngest children. So we're making sure that we have enough buses so that we can service those areas and get kids to and from school. Today, it's an equity issue, it's an access issue, especially when the weather's not good. Parents may choose to just simply keep their kids at home rather than have them walk along a very busy street or cross a very busy street, especially when the weather is really not good. So we anticipate that we will improve access for students by being able to provide this additional transportation service.
And then on the other side of transportation is the facility side. And Dr. Cavasos, I've heard you mention in a number of community meetings that we're addressing really for the first time a facility under improvements that is not a campus location or a school location, but one that supports our transportation teams. Paint a picture of that process and what we're looking to do.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, this is also new in our evolution as a school district in Arlington. The significant investment in a non-campus facility. So if you think about that, non-campus facility deals with operations or support staff and things like that. We haven't as a district for many years, and again, no judgment, it's just that's how we've proportioned the bonds. In this case, it'll be an investment in the transportation and security complex and the operations center for those two functions. Currently, we have a number of buses, and we keep adding buses and transportation, and we really have a facility that was designed for a time when the district was small. And it's highly stressed in terms of its use. There aren't enough bathrooms for our employees, the very fundamental things. There are buses that are parked that are not undercover in terms of coverage structures. There's buses that are parked one behind the other, which is not efficient. And our security team as well has a number of vehicles that are in an environment that just simply is not conducive. So when you think of the operation of a district of this size with 60,000 students and 78 campuses, et cetera, we know that an operations center like that needs to continue to be improved as well. So this is the first time non-campus investment significant in terms of this site. And this has also resonated with our community, because many people throughout many years in Arlington have driven by, have entered into that facility and that complex for different services and things like that we have. And they understand that it is not conducive for an operation of our district this size. So big step forward for Arlington as well.
You know, I hear you say often that if there's a place that a bus can fit in over there, it will slip in. That doesn't necessarily make it safe,
That's
though.
correct.
And so part of safety is beyond the safety of schools. It's the safety of our fleet.
That's right, and the working conditions of our employees as well, with bus drivers and security staff and others.
You mentioned that about, you know, there just not being enough restroom facilities, and I was speaking with, I believe, Kelly Horn on our team recently, and he said essentially the facility, the transportation facility, was the original building built, and it's 70-something years old. You know, for a district that maybe had 6,000 students, not 60,000 students, and there's never been a significant upgrade. So there's 6 restrooms total for around 300 staff people. So that's uncomfortable just to think about.
Right. Well, and it's a necessary improvement, yeah.
So let's take some more questions and we'll come back. So one question from Facebook, will the video be posted for people to watch after school? Absolutely. So the rebroadcast of this show will stay on Facebook. So even if you're watching after we're off the air live, you can still leave your questions for Dr. Cavasos, for Ms. Powell, or for any of our subject matter experts, and we'll get an answer back to you from the right person as soon as we can. Let's see, we were going to talk about fine arts, and so we'll go ahead and change directions there because Arlington is known as a district focused on the fine arts and has been for a number of years. So it makes sense that there's some investment in the bond proposal for fine arts. Ms. Powell, you want to give us the broad overview of what those fine arts programs are?
Sure. So there are items in this bond proposition for fine arts in both the facilities component and in kind of the standalone fine arts piece. So in terms of facilities, we have funding in this bond proposition to right-size rehearsal spaces in our high schools. We have very large programs, and in some of our high schools, we've outgrown the band halls, the orchestra halls, the choir rooms, and so we have funding here to take care of those, right-size those spaces. We also have funding to continue work that we began in the 2014 bond program, the second phase of this work now, to improve our auditoriums. We focus largely on the technical systems in the 2014 bond programs, the lighting, the stage rigging, the sound systems, and projection systems in our auditoriums. With this particular bond program, we have funding for some improvements in the house portion of the auditoriums, new sound attenuation systems, and house lighting systems is an example. Also, our fine arts classrooms. We actually did not make any improvements in 2014 to fine art spaces or to visual art spaces, and we have some needs in those classrooms for both the rooms and then the equipment in the rooms, including the kilns and including as basic need as their work surfaces. And so we have funding for that. We also have on the equipment side, we have funding to invest in new equipment for our small theaters and our black boxes. And those are really the learning spaces for our theater programs. And we have some real needs there to upgrade and invest in new equipment for those spaces. We'll also continue purchasing instruments. We really began to grow our instrument inventory through the 2014 bond program. At the beginning of the 2014 bond program, we eliminated instrument rental fees because we knew that sometimes just the mere fact that a student might have to pay to rent an instrument was a barrier for kids and might keep a child from being able to participate in band or orchestra. So we eliminated the rental fee, we expanded our inventory of instruments, and we have seen our participation increase over the last few years. So we'll continue increasing our inventory to support our growing fine arts programs, and so that's part of this bond package. And then a final piece of this, I would say, are uniforms. We replace uniforms on a scheduled basis. So marching band uniforms we replace every 8 years, drill team uniforms every 5 years. Choir uniforms typically can go longer. They don't get the wear and tear that the drill team or the marching band uniforms get. But we have these on a scheduled rotation, and so we have funding in this bond proposition to take care of replacing those items that reach the end of their life cycle between now and 2025. So those are the key things.
And then Dr. Cavasos, the programming side of fine arts is something that's included in this bond as well. They're in the 4th year of the cohort of the Corey and Jones Fine Arts and Dual Language Academies. And I believe that you've mentioned saying to folks, you know, we'll make sure these kids have a place to go when they get to junior high. Well, they're almost there. So what does the 2019 bond include that would help those kids continue on?
Yeah, so the 2019 bond addresses the dual language fine arts program as the students matriculate to junior high and then eventually to high school. So the junior high will be Gunn Junior High. Gunn Junior High will continue to serve students that are zoned for Gunn Junior High. So this will be a school within a school concept, where the Dual Language Fine Arts Academy students that are coming from Jones and Corey in particular will be served at the junior high at Gunn. So there's funding in here to repurpose some space, to add classrooms because of the number of students that will be attending there. Ultimately, they'll end up at Arlington High School, and there's funding in here to do the same. It'll be a school within a school concept, very similar to our STEM Academy at Martin High School currently. And so these students will have more classroom space as well as some repurposed space for those specialties. I think it's an important kind of highlight that as we expand programs and as opportunities for students, that those opportunities are aligned, and that there is some matriculation in the system, not only for the instructional delivery, but for the facilities as well. And so this is another component of the 2019 bond.
All right, let's see what our next question is. Someone has asked for a Spanish translation. If you go to AISD.net, Bond 2019, we have all of the presentations about the 2019 bond program translated into Spanish. And then we also have a flyer from each school that will list the improvements that will be made to each individual campus. Those are also available in Spanish. In your translations on Facebook, you can translate any of our Facebook posts into Spanish as well. So let's, here's a good question. We haven't talked about athletics yet. So we have a question about girls' softball fields and where those are going to go. They're currently in a complex where girls' softball plays at Workman Junior High, but there's a plan to create equity around that program. Ms. Powell, where is softball going to be held?
Sure. So today, our high school softball teams play their competition games at a complex that is located at the Workman Junior High campus. We have 3 fields there. They do not have competition fields on their home campuses, and that's an equity issue. We're able to play boys baseball there, football, soccer, but we cannot host competition softball games on the home high school campuses. We had a lot of community feedback on this as we worked with our committee. This was a priority for a number of people that weighed in as we identified needs and put together recommendations for the board. And so ultimately we have funding here to create a competition softball field at each one of our 6 traditional high schools.
And then going on along with that is the athletics portion of football. And there is, in this proposition, an improvement around a football field, which can spark some conversations with people in the community. So what is Arlington ISD looking to ask voters to support in the 2019 bond around football?
Sure. So just to put a little context for familiarity to the district, for people that are watching, we have 2 competition athletic fields or football fields, one at Sam Houston High School and one at Lamar. So Lamar is Cravens Field, Sam Houston has Wildman Field. And we rent a 3rd facility from UTA to complete, we have 6 high schools, so to complete the pairing in terms of the competition and the spaces where they do that. UTA is soon going to take their stadium offline, and that's something that they've been working on. We're the last entity that they rent to, and so we have an agreement that we know we need to find a solution to that because their stadium will not be available much longer. And so as we've been working through this, we also, through a lot of stakeholder input, determined that we should have another Cravens and Wildman type field, and this one at Martin High School. And why Martin High School? Simply geography. Cravens is at Lamar, North Arlington, and if you, Sam Houston, Bowie and Sam Houston share that. Arlington and Lamar will share Cravens, and Martin and Seguin will share the one at Martin. And so when you think of this, this also has in this bond upgrade for concession, restrooms, locker rooms, etc. for Wildman and Cravens, accessible bleachers and things like that. So if you're familiar with these facilities, you know that Wildman and Cravens have existed the way they have for a long time and are not yet up to standard. At the end of this, we'll have 3 competition fields integrated into high schools for efficiency and better use, more use, I should say, that are up to standard. And they're well proportioned, they're moderate. If you're familiar with those facilities, they're moderate. Martin will have one, again, moderate as well, really based on our needs and also based on usage and making sure that it's integrated into a high school and not standalone somewhere so that they will get maximum use. which will then solve our third, stadium that we have to lease from UTA and allow our teams to really maximize the use of those.
And I think I called it a football field, but you correct me often. They're athletic fields
That's
because they're about more than football. So what else goes on that field would be used for?
Yeah, so there's
Martin?
track and soccer and other type of activities that happen in those fields. The band and others that use that facility as well. And then, of course, we know that when they're integrated into a high school, like we're planning, they get even more use from that home high school, if you will. And so it's a model that is responsive to the needs, is also a model that is moderate in terms of our actual needs as a district with these sports, but also allows us to have our own facility and not have to lease and continue to lease, and knowing that UTA is really coming offline in terms of our availability and others.
Okay, very good. So I want to end with one section today that's in our bond proposal, and that's around safety, security, and technology. But let's see if we have any other questions. We do. Someone just asked about security. Wow. What will the bond do to improve school security? So that's where we were going to go next. So there is a portion of the bond proposal around this security question. Dr. Cavasos, you want to field that
Sure.
one?
So as we, throughout the district, we've addressed security and safety. I guess an overall point is, and that I've made often in our community, is that safety and security is not something that we think about once or every once in a while or when there's a bond. This is an ongoing process for us to address safety and security. And our most recent threat assessment team, for example, unrelated to the bond necessarily, but a really important safety feature for our district. In relation to the bond, it has to do with upgrading our cameras, adding cameras, coverage across the buildings and district, communication systems and radios and things like that are really important for safety and security, making sure that we have the right devices, the right infrastructure, the right network that can support these systems as well. So you think about even some of our facilities like the athletics that we just talked about, ensuring that when we redo and bring those up to standard, that they have an element of safety and security as well, because we know right now they're not proportioned that way, and they don't live that way in terms of that facility. So that allows us to address very important safety and security needs as well.
And Ms. Powell, technology is a big piece of our of running any school district in the world today. What are some of the technology planned improvements?
Sure. So we refresh technology every 5 years. So our technology, our instructional technology folks, our network technology folks came together with teachers, end users, and the subcommittee from the Capital Needs Steering Committee to evaluate needs. We've identified, we need to continue that replacement cycle. So there are dollars here to continue replacing devices on a schedule. Also expanding access to technology across all of our levels and providing additional carts of technology to in libraries, for example, and making sure that in particular programs where it's important for a student to have access to a device all the time, they can take home with them and bring back, we will make sure that we have enough devices so that every student in that program can have a device. We refer to that as strategic one-to-one. Some districts 7, 8, 10 years ago began doing one-to-one for an entire grade level. And I think
now, are you referring to, for example, every student would get an iPad or a computer or a phone or something?
Right.
Okay.
And so then they learned very quickly that's very, very hard to sustain, and it really is not effective necessarily for the learning process. But we do have certain programs where that is important. And so we have funding available for that. We also have funding to upgrade network equipment to make sure that all of the operating systems and all of the student access to internet services and to learning software can function as it should. So those are the primary things for technology that are included in the bond proposition.
Thank you. I want to remind you guys again, we are live on Facebook. If you have questions that pertain to the 2019 bond proposal that Arlington ISD will have on the ballot on November the 5th, go ahead and leave your questions down in the comment section and we'll answer them while we're here on the air. If you're watching on the rebroadcast, go ahead and leave those questions too, because we'll have Dr. Cavasos, Cindy Powell, any of our subject matter experts get you the answer back. And we'll post that in the comments for everyone else to read as well. So let's go back to our questions. We're going to go back to our Fine Arts and Dual Language Academy with this question. About our decision, we didn't really talk about this, so let's preface this. Sure. We will be moving our 6th graders from Corey Fine Arts Academy and from the Jones Fine Arts Academy to Gunn. So our Facebook poster wants to know how we inform that decision.
Yeah, so we would actually, when they become 6th graders, they would attend Gunn. And really fundamentally is for instructional purposes. So a response to their instructional needs with fine arts and dual language that they have. So we know at a junior high, for those particular needs of fine arts and dual language, is better equipped in terms of staffing, time, and otherwise to meet their needs. And so what we've said from the beginning is that we want to make sure that our district continues to adapt to the needs of our students, first and foremost instructionally, but also through facilities. So as these programs have continued to matriculate through the system, when they become 6th graders, we know that more opportunities, more refined opportunities for these two specialties will be better at a junior high, hence the decision to have them attend Gunn.
Okay. I don't see the question, but I know it's going to come up. So I'll go ahead and ask it for you guys. Are you going to move all 6th graders into junior high?
Thank you for the question.
You're welcome.
In essence, no, that's not in our plan. Really, again, it's to respond to the instructional needs, first and foremost, of the students. And when you talk about a specialty like a dual language and a fine arts, when there is an increased amount of time and specialized staff and things like that, it makes more sense to move them into a junior high setting where those things can be maximized. Now, again, this is something that we continue to adapt to the needs of our students. So the instructional response, as I often call it, to the needs is really what drives our decisions.
Okay, very good. All right, the 2014 bond included a lot of facility conditions across the district, a lot of needs. So why are there still so many condition projects in the 2019 bond? And what types of condition projects are included? Ms. Powell, I hear you answer this question
Sure. No, I can speak to this. So a couple of things. First of all, before the 2014 bond program, it had been over 10 years since we had had another significant bond program. And bond programs are typically the way you make improvements, significant capital improvements to a building. And so we had a lot of needs that needed to be addressed in 2014 that simply had not been touched through a bond program in the prior 10 years. So we did an assessment in 2014. We prioritized the needs at that point, and we've made a number of improvements through the 2014 bond program at all of our campuses. But we still have additional needs that need to be addressed. Also, just like our homes, things don't reach the end of their life cycles always at exactly the same time. So we consistently have air conditioning units that tend to continue timing out or aging out, along with electrical systems and flooring systems. We have paving that needs to be repaired. We have included funds in the 2019 bond proposition for those kinds of things. We prioritize those needs based on the age and the condition of the building. Other things you'll find are restroom upgrades, kitchen upgrades, lighting within buildings, paint, paving, and ADA accessibility across the district. So we tried to prioritize and continue our improvements in that area to continue to protect our investment, if you will, in buildings that we intend to serve us for many, many more years.
Okay, so I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up for today, but we know that you guys might still have some questions, and that's okay. If you're watching in the rebroadcast, just leave your questions down in the comment section, and we'll get one of our subject matter experts to answer those questions for you. I want to thank you guys for all the great questions today, and thank our guests, Dr. Marcelo Cavasos, Ms. Cindy Powell with Arlington ISD, for helping to educate us more about what's in the bond program. Now, we have everything available for you on our website. You can go to AISD.net/bond 2019, or just find that right on the homepage of AISD.net. And then leave us your questions, your comments, and we'll get back with you. I want to thank you so much for joining us today on our Facebook Town Hall Live meeting. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you.